For a brief moment in time, there existed a promising and new upcoming mecha franchise that could have potentially rivaled Mobile Suit Gundam, Macross, Front Mission, and even Armored Core in the world of video games. Zone of the Enders was released in 2001 and was created by Konami and Hideo Kojima. Yes, that Hideo Kojima. The game sold well enough to be considered a moderate success. To help with sales numbers in North America, it was even paired with a demo for the then upcoming Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty. Now, I did not have the pleasure of growing up with this game in my youth. I did not even hear about it until nearly a decade after its initial release. But those who did grow up playing this game will likely have fond memories playing it and its sequel. For this video, however, we will only be focusing on the first game. So I finally got around to playing the game 2 decades after its initial release. Since I had no nostalgia goggles for the game, I was therefore able to ask and test for myself if this classic title still holds up in 2025. The story of Zone of the Enders takes place in the year 2172 on the Jupiter space colony Antillia. A battle takes place outside where an invading force attempts to capture 2 orbital frames, which is what mechs are called in this game / world. We are quickly introduced to the game's antagonist, Viola, an unhinged and short-tempered female pilot. From there, it cuts to Leo, the game's main character, and who we play as. At this point in the story, we see that Leo is already traumatized by the battle taking place in and around the space colony where he lives. After failing to save his friends and in attempt to escape the battle, Leo accidentally stumbles onto the new orbital frame called Jehudi. The name Jehudi is actually derived from the ancient Egyptian god of the moon, wisdom, knowledge, writing, hieroglyphs, magic, art, and judgment. He is often depicted as a man with the head of an ibis and holding a staff. I couldn't find if Jehudi the god was also a fighter. At the very least, through Jehudi's onboard computer, Ada, Leo does gain some wisdom and knowledge. And he also gets to pass judgment on some of the game's villains. But I admit that could all just be a stretch. I bring this up because the game seems to have some ancient Egyptian influences, including later on where we're introduced to another orbital frame literally called Anubis, which is named after another Egyptian god. With the game having been released in 2001, it makes sense it would have some Egyptian influences, since at the time there was a renewed interest from popular culture into ancient Egypt. The films The Mummy and its sequel The Mummy Returns were both successful films, and not long after there was also The Scorpion King. In anime, at least as far as Saturday morning cartoons go, Yu-Gi-Oh was also popular around this time as well. Anyway, back to the story. Once Leo enters the literal cockpit of Jehudi, no, I'm not making a joke out of it, the game already does that on its own. Leo is tasked with saving the colony. Although Leo repeatedly attempts to escape the fighting, he is constantly asked and told by adults to continue fighting. If you're familiar with the standard giant mecha formula of forcing children to fight in war, this should all sound and feel familiar to you. The story overall works well enough. It's not exactly anything groundbreaking, especially for mech fans, but it gets the job done. My only criticism is when the story attempts to get deeper than it has to, more specifically when attempting to delve into the background of the villain, and even Leo himself. This is where the lack of quality in the writing gets exposed. To end this category on a good note, my favorite aspect about the story is that, although it mentions of a much larger conflict, this game is self-contained to the colony of Antillia, instead of some large epic war. My favorite Gundam series is 0080 War in the Pocket after all, and it sort of does the same thing. All things considered, I have to give the story a 3 out of 5, which is still good overall, or passable at the very least, depending on how you want to look at it. Next up is the voice acting and dialogue. In this category, I include the dialogue because not all games have voice acting, and I don't believe it would be fair to take off points from a game not having that. For example, the original Pokemon games for the Nintendo Game Boy. So for here, I have to say that the dialogue still holds up. Even for the time, it's actually quite well done. There isn't any breakout performances or anything all that special. There aren't exactly any bad line deliveries either. And while Leo's dialogue could arguably get a little annoying at times, it's important to remember that this is a child. A literal kid won't exactly be speaking like Shakespeare. Maybe the worst Leo does is when he first has to scream after realizing that he may have killed someone for the first time.
The target has disappeared. I can detect no sign of vital activity.
You mean that everyone is dead?
That is correct. Good work, sir.
After Leo, Ada might be the next weakest link depending on your tolerance level. Ada is the onboard computer of Jehudi and talks like a computer. It also follows the typical trope of an AI struggling to learn and understand human nature through its interactions with Leo.
There is something that I must remind you. I must eject the cockpit next time. Do not repeat what you did last time.
What? Yes.
I am a mere program. A lifeless program. What you did to save me was very illogical.
I'll also have to give the voice acting and dialogue a 3 out of 5. Next up are the visuals and graphics. The game's graphics focus more on the mechs and environments, which all still look presentable even in 2025. Its use of dark spaces and light in the background help to create the game's atmosphere. The character models, however, don't look all that great. However, the game has a bit of an anime style to it, which helps to keep the animations from looking too dated. The cutscenes are also well done for their time. And the way Jehudi moves during combat doesn't look all that bad. 3 out of 5 again. As for the music and sound design, there isn't exactly a song or background music that jumps out at me. The only exception being the main menu's theme song. I feel the title's theme is actually perfect for setting the mood and welcoming new players to the world of the game. It sets it apart from other games of its time, and perhaps even games of today, including mech games. Unfortunately, this is also where the game's soundtrack sort of peaks. The specific songs in the opening video, before getting to the main menu, or the song at the end credits were both standard for what anime fans were used to at the time, but none of it was particularly memorable. There also wasn't any sound design from the weapons that really jumped out at me. Nothing all that unique or memorable, but also nothing that felt or sounded out of place. As a result, 3 out of 5. Now for the really good and most important stuff, the gameplay and controls. Use the left analog stick to move around. Triangle is to move up, while X is to move down. To dash or boost in any direction, simply hold down R2 while moving the left analog stick. L2 is to lock on and switch between targets, while L1 is to release the lock on in order to escape. R1 is to block. Square is your primary attack. From a distance it will use a small beam gun, and up close it will switch into a melee attack. Seems simple and extremely basic at first, but with the R2 button the attacks change. From a distance your ranged attacks hold more power. This also works in close range for melee. The circle button at close range will grab onto an enemy and throw them. Circle from a distance is also used for the various secondary weapons you'll unlock throughout the game. Some are useful, others even more useful than the others, and will make combat a lot easier. While a few weapons will hardly be used, unless you really want to use them, just because. Lastly, there's the right analog stick. I left this one for last because it does have some issues. The right analog stick does not exactly control the game's camera. It controls the direction Jehudi faces. In the standard open map areas, this works fine. But later on in the game, you'll need to fly through some tunnels, and this is where the limitations become apparent. Your turn rate is extremely slow, and even though I'm not someone who feels motion sickness, in most instances, I have to say that flying through these tunnels gave me a little motion sickness. The camera was simply not designed with these levels in mind. I'm not someone who usually criticizes camera angles in games, as I always just view them as something to adjust to, or skill issue for short. But for this game's tunnels, I felt it was worth mentioning. This same system of motion is also used for free aiming, which at worst is a little difficult, and at best is a little clunky. All things considered, the combat in this game works well enough. Most fights are generally fun, and some of the enemies can be avoided if you don't want to waste your time with them. The boss fights are also fairly well done. My only nitpick is that one of the bosses in the middle part of the game actually feels more difficult than the final boss at the end of the game. This could in a way be remedied by simply increasing the difficulty, but that would also make the previous bosses more difficult as well. To sum it up, I'd have to give the gameplay a 3 out of 5 as well. Again, not a bad thing, still good. Lastly, how accessible is this game? This is answered by looking at how easy it is to access this game today. And for Zone of the Enders, it's not all that difficult to find a used copy online for PlayStation 2. No PlayStation 2? No worries, there's also the HD collection for the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3. Unfortunately, that's about it. While its sequel did get released for the PlayStation 4, this game has not seen a re-release for whatever reason. There might be another way to play the game if you have a PC or maybe a phone, but I wouldn't know anything about that. So 3 out of 5. All things considered, I have to say that the game still holds up today. It also doesn't overstay its welcome, as it's only about 4 to 5 hours long. And it's not often we get to see a mech game with a full-fledged story with character animations. Even less so to see a mech game's story remain consistent throughout the entire campaign. Now, you may be wondering why I'm using this hexagon as a way to examine the game. I'll use Ace Combat to explain. Notice how every jet in the game has its own stats displayed through the hexagon. Some are faster, while others are more specialized for ground or air combat. And while something like the F-22 could be considered the best plane or one of the best planes in the game, that doesn't mean that the other planes are bad or less fun. Depending on the player, someone might prefer to use the A-10 and still have fun. A lot of other players may want to pick the F-14 instead because of its iconic look. Regardless of the plane, it comes down to how the player wants to use it and what they want to get out of the game. And so, going further with my videos, I will be using this system. And while for today's video, a clear rating of 3 out of 5 could be given, I still won't be giving any games a clear overall rating. A 7 out of 10, for example, could very possibly be a 10 out of 10 for someone. It all depends on the player with what they want, what they like, what they may or may not be used to, what their interests are at the time, even down to where they are in life when they sit down to play a game. With the hexagon, I will merely be trying to show what the game's strengths and weaknesses are. In the same way, a game will show you the stats of a playable character, weapon, or item. Something seen as less practical to someone may end up being a lot of fun for someone else. So I ask that in the future, you try not to see the hexagon as some type of enemy. It's only meant to attempt to show what the game is more focused on. Okay, that's all the time I have for you today. See you all on Mars next time.